Talk. This is Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth.
We're on track to flip the switch on October 1st.
We are on track to have the marketplace up and running on October 1st. I'm confident that we will be up and running and on track on October 1st.
Do you have a contingency if the exchanges are not ready, up and running with a fully informed public by October 1st?
As I answered before, Congressman, we will be open for open enrollment October 1st.
So you can assure this committee there will be no further deadlines missed, no further delays in the implementation of the exchanges?
We are on track to meet the October 1st deadline. The easiest, most consumer-friendly website to use in multiple languages with the kind of helpline that pops up, when you're shopping online that can... Regardless of what you hear, in every state in the country, there will be a new health marketplace open for business on October 1st.
Welcome back. Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth. That is Kathleen Sebelius, Health and Human Services Secretary. That proved not to be true. Our guest, Paul Howard, Senior Fellow at the Manhattan Institute, and a man, if you're asking about health care and how to bring costs down, wow. I know he's testified before Congress, but I really wish he would have been in behind those closed-door meetings. Paul, welcome to Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth. What did you think of the montage?
Well, it's certainly a setup for a great punchline, isn't it? Obviously, nothing has played out the way that the administration said it would.
And there are so many examples of that. Now, I want to get to the lie that was, and when I say lie, that means to knowingly mislead the American people or knowingly mislead, and then we can fill in the blank. But when it comes to the Obama administration and President Obama, we have learned that the president was not telling the truth when he said that people would be able to keep their health care plans. And yet we have the president blaming the insurance companies, or at least the administration, blaming the insurance companies for this and accusing them of having problems grandfathering in plans that would be, well, it would make the idea of keeping your own plan okay. And so there's interesting how when you get caught and so you say, hey, you'll be able to keep your plan, and that changes, and then NBC News, of all places, goes and finds evidence that you knew about this in 2010, that up to 67%, and I hear as high as 80% of people buying on the individual market after the enacting of the law would lose their coverage. Your thoughts on that?
Right. This is something we at the Manhattan Institute have been talking about for a while now. We actually put out a report on this topic over a year ago. So because of the regulations under the Affordable Care Act, something called creditable coverage, you have to offer at least 10 essential health benefits, things like maternity care, prescription drug care, drug addiction rehabilitation services, rehabilitative care, hospital care, which many of these policies may not have, which also helps keep their premiums low and more affordable. Also, if you're a 60-year-old woman or a 27-year-old man, if you're thinking, I don't need to buy maternity coverage, don't put that in my policy. It makes it more expensive. I don't have to use that coverage. The president and his advisors obviously knew this, but this administration, more than any in recent memory, where the message really trumps the policy and the truth, and they just kept repeating something that they knew was going to be false, to get this healthcare law passed and then to get them through the November 2012 elections.
So at the Manhattan Institute, you all have been on top of this, and you're the director of the Institute's Center for Medical Progress. When we look at the law overall, would you say progress has been made in healthcare reform?
I think that, look, I'll be honest, the U.S. healthcare system had serious problems before the healthcare law came along. It's got serious problems today. I think the healthcare law is going to exacerbate many of those problems. So I think it does a few things. It adds more regulations onto the market, which generally drives prices up. it throws more subsidies at the market. For some people with low income or who had health problems and couldn't get coverage before, they're going to find coverage more affordable. But for more than half of the people in the individual market today who are losing those policies, who are getting cancellation notices to the tune of hundreds of thousands right now, those people are going to see much higher out-of-pocket costs, and more people are probably going to wind up paying higher costs for insurance this year or losing insurance than are going to get coverage under the law. So I think the law is going to take a lot of existing problems and in many cases make them worse.
Okay, but you did mention there's going to be a faction of Americans who are going to do better in this. And that's because of subsidies? Yes?
Absolutely. So what you've got, look, I think that, everybody would have agreed, left and right would have agreed that there is because of the way that we tie insurance to employment, which is the result of a IRS decision that dates back to World War II. Employers were under price controls, couldn't compete with wages, so they had to say to the IRS, hey, can we offer health benefits as a non-taxable benefit? And the IRS said yes. But that means if you don't get insurance through your job and you get sick, it's much more expensive to buy insurance on the open market. And insurers could, decline coverage because, after all, buying insurance when you're sick is like buying, homeowners insurance after your house is burning. It just doesn't work. So that is a problem that could have been fixed with a very targeted solution, high-risk pools, universal tax credits, rather than tying them through employment. A number of different ways of addressing that problem. But the law both raises the cost of insurance and then floods the market with new subsidies. So we're charging younger and healthier people more to become insured, requiring them to buy richer policies or pay a penalty, and we're trying to address this other problem at the same time, while also trying to keep U.S. healthcare costs down because they're eating up more of the federal and state budgets every day.
All right, I'm going to play devil's advocate throughout this, Paul, because I do want things challenged, and you are not only an expert, and that is an understatement, but you are fair, and I know fairness is a big thing in America. We all want fairness. So, and I'm being serious and sincere in that, because what you're not politicizing things, and you're not playing the game and piling on. And so I sincerely appreciate that. Nevertheless, I'm a talk show host. I do pile on. That's what we do. I try, but I want to deliver the truth. And when I pile on, I hopefully am making the point and backing it up with facts. Here's the point. Here's where I'm going with this, Paul. 80% of Americans are fine, aren't they, when it comes to their health insurance before Obamacare and after Obamacare? That's what we keep hearing.
Look, the majority of Americans, get their insurance through a few different ways. They're getting it through Medicare, and we can come back to this, but Obamacare does take $760 billion over 10 years out of Medicare and funnels it back into the exchanges. We can have a conversation about that. I think it's a bad idea. That's what it does to Medicare, but Medicare coverage basically isn't changing. Medicaid coverage for the poor is expanding. States are already being crushed by Medicaid costs. I think that's probably a poor decision to make. And then you've got the exchanges, which are just affecting the individual and small group markets, and for the relatively small number of Americans who don't have employer-based coverage or get it through some government program. So that's the problem that we're talking about, and I think that Obamacare makes the existing problems worse because it makes insurance more expensive. And then, as many as 80% of the people who hold individual policies today are going to lose their coverage. The president promised, as we talked about a few minutes ago, repeatedly, those people will be able to keep their coverage. Obviously, that's not going to happen. And they're going to be winners and losers. I think ultimately, at the end of the day, the losers are going to outnumber the winners under the law.
Okay, and Paul, just to go back to that 80%, because here are things that we hear a lot in the responses. And they obviously, talking points and the key messages that they want out may not even be germane to the question that's asked, but hey, they're going to throw these things in. And what you've just done is you explained the employer history, and that's really important to recognize how we got here. I appreciate that. But when we're talking about the 80% that they're speaking to, we're talking about Medicare, we're talking about Medicaid, and we're talking about employees getting it through their employer.
Right.
The question I have for specific with the employers, some have had their coverage dropped. Yes? No?
Right. Now that's That's a very good question. So, look, if you're a small employer in a state that hasn't had these regulations, they're called guaranteed issue or community rating before, and you've had good rates before, chances are you're going to see your rates increase significantly under the law, because it's going to, take your premiums and raise them to say, well, we're going to rate you in the same basket as these other companies that might have older and sicker employees. Because the law has a penalty for employers that don't offer coverage for employees working more than 30 hours a week. A lot of companies, especially with low-wage employees, are going to look at their workforces and say, how can I keep my workforce under that number or shift those to other jobs? That is a serious problem. So those people are going to find that they're losing hours or losing jobs. It is a huge economy, but we're hearing lots and lots of stories of companies doing that. And then, look, if you're a large self-insured employer, that's really the market that's not going to change very much. So the IBMs of the world, not going to change so much. But again, Darden restaurants, other companies that are smaller, looking for ways, because of the law's incentives, to avoid the penalty. It's been put off for a year, but it's hanging out there like Damocles' sword over the head of employers.
All right. Now, I know you said you wanted to return to Medicare, but what you just said, and I want the folks to understand this, because it takes me a while, and they're smarter than me, yet I think we need to understand that every time they mention that stat, remember what Mr. Howard has said here. He has said, break that down. There are 3 parts to that. He just took on the employer part of it. Now we shift to the Medicare part of it. You mentioned the money being taken out of that. I know we're going a little in the weeds here, but my question to you is, and the Medicaid, you can take them both there, but please explain what's going on there, and access to care for people on Medicaid that is growing in the states that have accepted the deal. Bottom line, they're going to have a very tough time seeing a specialist. Please explain.
Absolutely. Let me start just with Medicare very quickly. So what the law does over several years is it adjusts, i.e. reduces Medicare payments to certain categories of providers, including hospitals and skilled nursing homes. Medicare's own actuaries have said that about 1 out of 6 Medicare providers over time are going to become unprofitable, quote unquote, which means either they're going to drop out of the market or stop seeing Medicare enrollees because they can't make any money off of them. That is a long-term problem for the program. Medicare's actuaries expect that eventually those cuts have to be rolled back. And the reason that's important is because if the cuts have to be rolled back, the cost of the law starts to skyrocket, and it's already billed at fully accounted 10-year implemented cost of $2.6 trillion. So that's really the challenge for Medicare. Nobody expects really that we're going to sit here and let seniors not get access to care, but it also means the law is far more expensive than it's been billed as. For Medicaid, Medicaid is already the largest or second largest item on most states' budgets. So expanding, Medicare with this promise that, for 3 years the feds are going to take basically 100% of the cost the first year, and then it dwindles down to 90% after the third year. So states are only picking up 10% of the cost of the Medicaid expansion. Well, the money has to come from somewhere, right? The federal government gets its money from state taxpayers. So that money has to come from somewhere. The government already has, well over $30 trillion with a T in unfunded Medicare liabilities that it can't pay for. By 2020, Medicaid as a federal state program is going to be charging $1 trillion a year. So enormous cost. You cannot simply say, the feds will be paying for it. States are being crushed by their Medicaid budgets now. So adding an additional 10% to a credit card bill that you already can't pay is not good financing. So that's really the challenge there. And you pointed out quite correctly that about 30% of providers today, doctors, specialists, do not accept any new Medicaid patients. So we're giving people an insurance card that says Medicaid on it, but denying them, real access to a physician.
Okay. Now, New Jersey Congressman made this statement today. Pretty much, and I'm paraphrasing, a Democrat from New Jersey, and I'm blanking on his name, Passarell. But anyway, he in essence said, are you going to tell, after we've been through this entire process and gotten it passed, we all came together when it came to the prescription drug coverage. I wasn't for it, but I went back to my constituents and said, we are going to find a way to make this work. They're using Obamacare and saying it's analogous to the prescription drug benefit. Tell me, is that a fair apples-to-apples analogy?
I don't think it is. In some respects, you could say, hey, Democrats didn't like this legislation, but the reality is, first of all, I'd point out to the congressman, Medicare Part D was passed with strong bipartisan support under President Bush. So that right there was a huge difference between President Obama's Affordable Care Act, which was passed with 0 Republican votes, and Prescription Drug Act, Medicare Modernization Act, which was passed with strong bipartisan support. I think it was 60 votes in the House and a number of senators in the Senate. So that was true. Medicare Part D also didn't reshuffle the rest of the U.S.'s prescription drug market. It was a targeted program just for seniors. It was unfunded, so there are serious deficit concerns you can raise about that program, but it didn't remake the rest of the U.S. healthcare landscape. Obamacare has far-reaching implications for every sector of the U.S. healthcare enterprise. And that's an important part. And this was also a law that was not carefully thought through. Remember that there was a House version passed, a Senate version passed, and then Scott Brown was elected in Massachusetts in 2010, so they couldn't go back and have the law go through reconciliation. So this is really go through a joint conference between the House and Senate. So this is really a bill that is deeply half-baked in many ways. So I'd respond that way and say, look, though the problems with the rollout, though, are entirely or almost entirely of the administration's own making. Secretary Sebelius has admitted as much in saying, we wish we had 5 years for this.
What would you ask her tomorrow? If you had one question, 2 questions that you could, what would you ask?
What did the White House know, and when did it know it? I think those would be my questions. Because terrific reporting by of all places, the New York Times, Washington Post, have pointed out that the administration made deliberate political decisions in the summer of 2012 to delay key regulations until after the election. So even after key regulations were written that would have given states, contractors who are working for HHS, and others real certainty about how the websites were supposed to operate, it withheld that information. So this really looks like, you can't really lay this at the feet of Republicans for whatever reason. You can say, gee, they hate the law, and by golly, they certainly do. But this is a mess that is entirely of HHS and the administration's making. All
right, final question. I appreciate you going over time with us. We have about a minute left. Here it is. Paul Howard, Manhattan Institute Senior Fellow and Director of the Manhattan Institute Center for Medical Progress. 3 things you would do to fix the problems, the challenges that we have, including pre-existing conditions.
Right.
Thoughts?
I think you go to a universal tax credit or tax deduction, and you can, economists can debate which is the best one. So everybody, regardless of where they get their insurance, can take the same deduction. You give high-risk pools, which are special help for people who don't have insurance and have serious health conditions. You fund those through the federal government. And then you really work on transparency initiatives and quality initiatives so that everybody can easily compare doctors and hospitals and shop for the most cost-effective care they can find for themselves and their families. I think when we are in charge, patients are in charge, the system will respond and will become much more affordable and effective.
Paul Howard, appreciate it. I'm going to be harassing you for more interviews, just throwing out the warning right now because you were great. I was all over the shop, but wow, you nailed it, and we really appreciate not only your understanding of the issue, but also your ability to communicate it. Bravo, my friend. Thank you.
I very much appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Take care. Paul Howard, Manhattan Institute Senior Fellow and Director of the Manhattan Institute Center for Medical Progress. Now, Crane Durham will return on the flip side with another big issue. Crane, are you going to allow us to call in? Yes. Next hour, we will have your phone calls responding to this. But the next big issue, you've hit Iran, Israel. We've hit Obamacare. We're going to be hitting some of the hearing today, a little later, and then your phone calls. Oh, another issue, trust. It's a matter of trust. Hey, let's write a song about that. Hey, thank you, Billy Joel. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Here it is. Immigration. Yes, it is still out there and being pushed. Immigration reform. Now, Marco Rubio has pulled back and said we need to do a piecemeal. Thank you. Good idea. Crane Durham's nothing but truth. President Obama says differently. AFR talk.